disadvantage of running this thing, so I'm going to introduce ourselves. You see this microphone? It has nothing to do with what you're hearing. We're just recording this, and we want the audio to sound good when we broadcast. So when I'm doing this and you don't hear anything, that's why. Our speech is called Game Audio Making Audio Cool. You can see the Kool-Aid Man. That'll be explained. You might be thinking, who are these guys? What have they been drinking? And right, exactly. So, quick introduction. So, I'm Will Bucknum. I'm a voiceover producer. I've worked on over 60 games.
Awesome.
Viruses. Some of the top games I've worked on include War Thunder, Star Conflict, the Kick the Buddy games, which have been going good on iOS for a while, and a ton of other games. So my company's called Voice2Game. You can go to voice2game.com and check out what I've done. And I've been doing this for about 4 years now. I started doing this in St. Petersburg, Russia, for basically the biggest game audio company in Europe. And I have horrible stories about what it's like living in Russia. So ask me later. This is not what this is about. And with me is Mike Jones. He's a sound designer composer. He's worked on over 60 games, including Night at the Museum, Deadliest Warrior 1 and 2, Zumba Fitness, That's So Raven, some other licensed stuff like Dragon Ball Z, Marvel Heroes, and I don't know, 12 years. Anything else you want to say about yourself?
I'm awesome.
Okay, cool. I'd like to start with an example to get you thinking about audio for games in the way that we already think about audio in like television, movies, and stuff like that. Audio is what is used so much to sell a game, to sell a product or anything like that. And I want to give you a very classic example. I hope you enjoy this. Oh yeah! So for over 50 years, Kool-Aid has been using different variations of "oh yeah" to sell their product, and it's still working to this day. And as you'll see in games, we have the same potential to use audio to sell your game, to market your game, to create an identity for your game. And that's a very important thing that a lot of developers don't think about. We find, both of us working on over 50 games in our life, that audio is usually like the last thing that's thought about, but it actually needs to come first. And it's really important, and here's why. Audio supports gameplay. So audio doesn't just go along with the game. Audio actually drives what a player is doing. It gives you a foundation on top of what you're doing with your fingers to actually get you to feel like you're inside of a game, which is extremely important. It also plays a big role in marketing. Not just in the Kool-Aid way, but game trailers, when you hear something that's kind of, driving in a game, people talk about that a lot. Also, there's psychological effects. When you hear something that actually sounds good in a game, it activates the reward centers in your brain. There's been lots of studies about this. So a sound actually makes you feel like you're winning. And probably the best games out there that show this are probably like casino games. There's tons of games that you can play like on iOS or whatever that the only reward you're actually getting, you're not making any money, is just sounds. And those games do extremely well. But what most people need to understand is most of these effects are subliminal. You don't really understand that it's happening to you, but it's happening to you. Trust me. So let me give you just a quick introduction. This is kind of related to something that I got when I was taking some film classes, but I'm going to show you 3 introductions to the movie Psycho. And I want you to feel how the music is impacting you psychologically about what is going to happen in this film. So I'm going to start with the first one. This is just Psycho with it's silent. Enjoy. This is like the best moment for me right now. You guys look just totally... What was that?
The animation sequence for the intro, is that all fast?
I don't know.
No idea.
My knowledge is good, but it's not infinite or fully recallable at the moment. Okay, so obviously this is not the most exciting thing you've ever seen in your life. This is the original Psycho. Where's the mouse?
Gotta wait for it. Well, let's get this to it.
There it is.
All right, there we go.
How many of you guys have seen Psycho, by the way? Oh, that's awesome. Great. So you can feel the difference. The energy is there. It completely makes the animation feel different. It makes everything actually feel like it's happening harder and more aggressively to you. Now we're going to give you a third version, and I just want you to see how this feels different. Yeah, do it. Uh-oh. Okay.
Alfred Hitchcock.
Does it feel like a different movie?
There's no words on the screen.
Right, well,
There's that.
yeah. But you can see the audio has a huge part of the whole, and it's often forgot. So let me just describe to you what game audio is. Typically it's described as an atmosphere, game audio atmosphere. It has three parts: music, sound design, or SFX, or sound effects, and voiceover. And those three things work together to create a whole of the atmosphere. So the interaction between these three things needs to have some careful attention. So audio branding, good audio creates the identity, integral to establishing continuity to a franchise. So in just a moment here, Mike's going to show you some things. But basically, if you start at the beginning of your first game with good audio that's memorable, audio that's captivating, you can use that same thing forever, throughout your franchise forever, and people expect it and they love hearing it again. You change it a little bit, maybe, as technology gets better, but we're kind of there already. It sounds a little more high fidelity, whatever, but you'll hear, you'll know. And again, the familiarity, something that you like, that you hear again, you crave it, and that activates the reward center of your brain. So if you hear these sounds while you're walking down the street, boom, you're right back there and you're loving the game even though you're not playing it. So Mike has a few examples here for you.
Okay. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Awesome. Hang on.
Technical problems, 1 second.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, fine. Is Reason even open?
It's angry. Sorry. Things get angry sometimes. You just gotta deal with it.
No sounds. That's the problem. Our sound card's set to no sound.
Hey, it's there now. All right. Oh crap. All right.
We're gonna have to just. There it is. Okay.
Sweet. All right. Come on. Seriously?
See what happens when you get everything set up and it works perfectly?
Yep.
This is always the risk with audio presentations, by the way.
It is. Without a doubt. I'll just do this. Right. Everybody recognizes this game.
You just go through them all.
So obviously this is probably the most recognizable one. It's a little off the beaten path, but you know NBA Jam for sure. You guys will know what it is. Of course.
Could have used that one earlier.
Even for hardware or game hardware, like this is super iconic. Everybody knows what that means. Or even this. Or, you know, it's what's become a more recent like phenomenon for sure.
So let me go through some differences between like what makes game audio compared to like music that you just listen to. So like game audio is meant to be looped. That means that you're supposed to hear it over and over again repeatedly, not just like once and then you go back to it again later. Whereas your music, you just listen to it and then you listen to something else and then you come back to it. Maybe you like it a lot, you might listen to it like 2 or 3 times, but you're probably not gonna listen to the same song on like repeat for like 20 times in a row. Unless you're going through like a breakup or something weird, right? Game audio supports game action, which means it augments the feeling of the gameplay is trying to create. So it's actually meant to do something besides just be enjoyable music. It has something to do with what's happening in the game. Whereas your music just generates feeling independent from anything else. So your music is for your music, your feelings. Game music is trying to do something. And finally, game audio is meant to be played with other sounds, which means that sound effects have to work with it and sound good. Voiceover has to be able to go with it and all sound good together. It's not like your music is not like I don't know how many of you guys, you know, put on your Bryan Adams and then play like coins going on with it, but that's not what's like it's meant for, obviously. And it's super important because when you add sounds and voiceover to music, it's different, and we have some examples of that for you. But let me just talk about repetitive music. So game audio, there's 2 ways to do it. You start with a small loop, something that's like 5 to 10 seconds long, and it's like, you know, it's got your drums and your things, and it's, and then it keeps going like that forever. And so then you build this 1 to 1.5 minute loop, and then that just goes forever. That's repetitive music. This is what game music should be. You have thematic musical hooks, so like melodies that kind of are similar to each other, they work with each other, they flow in and out of each other. Then you build a loop with those elements, and then you have a dynamic looping loop is how I call it. But basically, you have a minute and a half, maybe more of something, but it's not the same throughout that minute and a half. And then you're not going to burn out players by hearing the same thing over and over and over again repeatedly. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here. And the reasons, you know, you do not want to repeat a 5 to 10 second loop over and over again is you're going to burn people out, and as I show you with Sting, it'll drive you into submission. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be put in a scorpion deathlock with their music. So Mike and I decided to show you how this works in practice. I created what I would say, you know, Galaga, if it was made today by game developers who don't know anything about music and sound design, what it would sound like. And I'm sorry, but I had to do it. So hopefully this will play. So it might sound good at first, but give it some time and then you'll start to hate it. Okay, so hopefully you could hear some things happening there. Well, we'll talk about it in a second. So now we have a different version. It's more balanced, more mixed, and Mike put that together for us.
I don't know. I don't see anything.
Oh, shoot.
Well, I suppose so.
Oh, no. Come on, baby.
Should I just look for the video?
Well, it's on the desktop or in the folder.
For sure. Bear with us. We'll just do this because this makes more sense.
There it is.
Oh, come on, dude. Really? What is with you? Just do it. Do what I ask.
Okay.
The thing sort of immediately noticeable in that is right is the fact that in the original mix, everything is just this big, massive brick wall of sound. You know, developers will work with sound designers, and sound designers are giving you assets that are meant to carry across. If I'm going to make a sound, I want to make sure it's heard. So I'm going to, you know, basically give you the best possible and loud version of that sound. It's not going to come to a developer pre-mixed. So when you just stack them all together and you don't do any mixing, then everything gets lost. You could barely hear any explosions. You're just hearing like ear bleed. The second mix, you bring things down to their proper level. And you know, you sort of give things sort of their space and in your dynamic frequency range, and everything sort of becomes more cohesive. You know, you probably don't use something that's incredibly jarring music and just is on a dire loop for eternity. So, you know, a little bit can go a long way when making those changes.
Yeah, to talk about that a little bit more, so I use the word bandwidth. The music takes up the entire bandwidth that the sound design also uses. So if you have music that is loud in the bass, loud in the mids, loud in the trebles, and has loud drums, there's no room for sound to go with that because it will just sound like part of the crazy music. So you have to be really careful when you're picking music for a game because it needs to support what's happening rather than overwhelm it. And I feel like what I've seen a lot in the world today, particularly in indie games, is that music is overwhelming, and sound design and voiceovers too can get lost in that, which is also disturbing when I make voiceovers for a game and then I hear it in the game finally and the music is 10 times louder and it's just like, all right, yeah. And you know, I'm like, okay, not showing my best work, even though it is my best work, unfortunately. So basically, you also need to plan your audio for increasing gameplay intensity. So if you make your audio at the beginning when everything's easy, and then all of a sudden later on in development you increase the difficulty and things get harder and faster, the sound design might overwhelm the music if you haven't planned for that to happen. So keep in mind as your game gets harder and faster that the sound design is probably going to be queuing off sounds fast like that also, and it needs to work. So again, why does it matter? Since it's largely subliminal, people who aren't audio experts don't realize how it's impacting them. Audio implies action, movement, pacing, and energy, so you need to make sure that your music actually goes at the pace that you want your game to go. And if your game is kind of naturally slow, you need to be careful about making your music too slow. You need to encourage people maybe a little bit to push the tempo a little bit faster to get them moving more. And if your game's really fast, you need to be careful about pushing it too fast to drive people away from the game because it makes them feel too frenetic. And emotion. Games are successful because the player's emotional investment. So if the music and everything's working together, they can have that emotional investment and play your game more. So emotional cue. People play games for emotional payout. If you don't get any rewards while you play the game psychologically, you wouldn't play. Audio provides these rewards, and we have some more examples with voice acting. So, as a voice director, I have some bones to pick with AAA studios, and I'm going to share those with you right now. So hopefully it won't prevent me from getting good work in the future. So why do you use voice actors? So one reason, the reason I do it, why I like doing voice direction, voice production, voice acting, is that it brings you into the game. When somebody is sharing, you know, their phrases, their dialogue with you, you feel like you're part of the game, you're with them. So suddenly, if you hear that voice coming at you, you're right there with the player or whatever that voice is coming from, and you're in that environment. That activates the reward center of your brain, again. And it's great for marketing too, because these phrases, if you're not just ripping off everything else that's happened before it, that gives you like, oh my God, that phrase, did you hear that in the game? People repeat it. That's like free marketing. You have a phrase that's cool, people will repeat it. Duke Nukem was the great example of that when I was growing up. All these phrases, some of them horrible, but still, like, yeah, definitely. So I'm going to give you some examples here. First thing is this is like AAA studios love to do this. They get Hollywood actors, people that aren't voice actors, they're just Hollywood actors. They love to get them into the game for marketing purposes, but there's really no point in that if you can't tell when you play the game that the voice that you're hearing is a famous actor because you don't realize it. So there are good reasons to do it for marketing, and I'm going to show you a good reason with Call of Duty, and then something else, and I'm going to talk about Elder Scrolls. So this is probably not going to work. No, come back. Good gravy.
Yeah, right.
Democracy? Democracy. Democracy is not what these people need. Hell, it's not even what they want. America's been trying to install democracy as a nation for a century, and it hasn't worked one time.
So that's great marketing, right? So they take Kevin Spacey, they reprise him in a role that we already know him from, from you know his House of Cards show, and then they show him in the game, and it's him. Holy crap! That's great marketing, right? And people love Kevin Spacey. That makes sense. Unfortunately, not all the game developers understand this, and we'll show you that with Destiny. See if it works.
I think you know where this is going.
There are reports of the fallout back at the Cosmodrome keeping a pretty tight guard on the old Skywatch. Could be one of their leaders, or it could be something valuable. The speaker's asking Guardians to look into it. Okay, the Skywatch is just on the other side of the steps. And it's surrounded by Fallen. Well, I'm ready if you are. We're in. This was one of Skywatch's old array stations, a link to the lunar colony. Dead end. Fallen sealed escape. I can get it open. Fallen really didn't want anybody getting in. What is this? Lots of ocean ahead. I've got a bad feeling about this.
So, those of you who may know who Peter Dinklage is, that was him. He's the small guy from Game of Thrones. And in my opinion, as a professional voice director, that was pretty monotone, pretty boring, and it completely lacked energy. And it's not his best work. And it's in my opinion, it's also very bad planning from Bungie on this, because the reviews on the game have been not amazing. They've been great, but not amazing, in large part because of story and because of the voice acting. And if your voice acting is going to bring down the reviews of your game in your AAA studio, that's not cool, because they actually have things written in their contract with their publisher that if their game reaches a certain rating, then they get like this massive like multi-million-dollar bonus. And they may have lost that just because of Peter Dinklage. So that's kind of like an amazing thing to like lose millions of dollars because of bad voice acting when it's not needed. So that kind of blows my mind. Another thing that's interesting, Elder Scrolls is we know these games, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Elder Scrolls Online. They use extremely famous actors, and I didn't know that while I played these games. How many of you guys play those games, Skyrim, any of those? Did you guys know that all these famous actors were in them? No, like nobody? Like literally nobody? Yeah, but they don't use him now. But yeah, so they're spending like bank on these actors, and they don't, in my opinion, they don't need to, because people don't recognize when they play the game that these are famous actors, and they're not voice actors except for John Cleese a little bit, but and Linda Carter a little bit. But that's.
I think Bill Nye has done some voice acting work.
And yeah, and Bill Nye, but they're not really voice actors by trade, and so the cost for this is enormous. We're talking this cast right there is millions of dollars for a game, whereas if you had gotten professional voice actors like Hollywood voice actors like somebody like John DiMaggio from Futurama or Billy West from Ren and Stimpy. It would have been a fraction of that and probably better. And that's kind of interesting thing about Elder Scrolls is they spend tons of money on these top actors, and then the rest of the roles, that's the bulk of the game, they go cheap on. So if you ever play the game and you're like, wow, this is awesome here, what happened? That's why, because there's not this goal for like uniform awesome quality. We're going to get the stars and then we're going to finish the game. And my dream is that people will just use voice actors for everything, not break the bank and make games of good quality consistently. Okay, I'm going to turn over to Mike.
Here you are. Okay. So now we're going to talk about immersion. So, for immersion, where it comes to voice and communication, that's more of a recent phenomenon with technology. We've definitely gotten into the way of getting people immersed with sound using 5.1 surround or using even stereo headphones with what's called head-related frequency transfer, HRTF. And that essentially gives you a 3D surround sound with just two speakers. We could do that in environments, but when you add like communications to that arena, so we're doing a lot of multiplayer games these days, like shooters and whatnot. Just having a bunch of people laughing and lolling in your ear is kind of pulling you out of the environment. But one of the bright points of Destiny is that Bungie's chat system has always been pretty uniquely good. Most people usually don't notice that if they're playing on 360 because they're probably playing in a party chat outside of the game. But if you're actually playing inside of the game, they do things where they add the chat audio to the environment. So I will show you an example here.
That looks like it might work.
This one, if I can see it, it'll work. So it's weird, sort of one-sided. So I'm playing with a friend. I'm talking to him, and he's hearing me for the first time in this environment. In Destiny, when you're chatting with somebody in a fire team, you can basically hear them all around in a 3D environment. You walk around and behind them, and they hear you. The further away you get, it adds sort of like a radio comm thing, which he'll say here. Well, it doesn't stop there. You're in these environments. And when you go into areas where you have different reverbs, the reverb carries across. So now they're in a cave. I've got to experience, basically 3 of my friends in different occasions. We just went through normal game chat. I usually use party chat, and then on the other end, I just hear them like, "Oh my God, dude, you're all in my ear. Oh, this is crazy." And I was like, well, "What are you talking about?" So I go into the system and make the changes. You can actually output the chat audio through the speakers, and then it completely changes everything. It gives you a feeling like, okay, now everything is a part of this, even the person I'm playing with, across wherever. Like, we're actually all in this world now. It's a minor thing, but it's major. It just changes the game. So like adding that immersion is just, it's an amazing thing. So.
And that comes back to authenticity, which I've been talking about, where, you want to feel like what you're doing, not that it's real, but it feels right. So everything needs to match, and that little thing that they did makes you feel like you're right in the right environment for what the game is. And that's kind of a realistic game. Games that are sillier, you want everything to be equally silly in the right ways. Every game has a mood, and when you're making a game, you need to figure out what that mood is and make sure everything you do matches that mood. Because if you have one mood that's serious, while another mood's silly, while another mood's like angry or frenetic, you can't put them all together because you don't get those 3 things as one. You get those 3 things at the same time clashing, and that's kind of what we're getting at there. This is just me being a voiceover producer now, telling everybody in here that's making games my advice. The temptation with voice acting is to do it like cheaply, because I know it's expensive to get art, it's expensive to get 3D animation working right, it's expensive to do programming, but you actually should spend a little bit of money when you're doing voice acting because of a few things. So the first thing is that good voice acting requires proper equipment, with microphones, good other equipment like preamps and mastering software like Pro Tools or whatever. If your voice actor isn't using a good microphone, isn't using a good preamp and things like that, there's nothing you can do to make it sound good. There's just like a limit technologically with hardware. So you need to have it sound good for it to sound good. I know that sounds crazy, but if you get to that point in your game where you're like, oh, I need voiceovers, that would be awesome. Let me go look online. And then you find like, oh, I found the cheap people. That's great. There's a reason they're cheap, and that's because they have a crappy USB microphone that can't do much, and they're amateurs and they haven't any practice with that, and you don't want that. If you want to sell your game, you can't cheap out on the audio, because that will bring you out of the immersion. It'll make people go, what? Ugh. And you don't want that. So then sort of to bring it all together, some advice when you're working with audio people, if you're going to work with audio people, or if you're an audio person and you're trying to talk with game developers. Audio is usually added at the end of a project, but that doesn't mean you should like wait to the end of the project to talk to audio people, because audio experts can help you plan for how to maximize the use of audio in your game. So if you come to me early on in development and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, like we don't have much to show right now, but this is what I want to do, and if you talk to me, I'll be like, okay, yeah, I know what some good audio ideas would be for that based on my experience working on games. Then you can get those in your mind at the beginning, so that you don't have to like come to the end of the game and be like, okay, ready for audio, and I'm like, you could have done this, and they're like, okay, but I can't do that now because I've already done it, and I have to break the game and rebuild it, and I want to ship this game in 2 weeks, which oftentimes I get asked to do things like 2 weeks before game shipped, and that doesn't work. So you don't lose anything by talking to audio people early on, because we'll just talk to you. You don't have to like pay us yet, so why not?
Case by case basis, I suppose.
Well, to some degree, right?
But we will talk to you for free. Talking is cheap.
Yeah, talking. That's exactly what I mean. Talking. We're not going to make the game audio for you for free. That's not what we do. So here's some things we know. We know where audio events are most likely to occur. We know where potential pitfalls of different audio approaches might happen, because we've seen them all. And we can see when you're about to fall off that cliff. We can see how some minor changes could actually make massive improvements to the game atmosphere and the gameplay. So just a few tweaks might make a world of difference that you didn't even realize. And finally, what might be difficult to implement as far as time-consuming or requiring extra engineering. So you might come to us and say, I got this game, it's going to be awesome, here's what I want to do with the audio, and I'll be like, that is awesome. How much time do you have? Okay, we can't do that. So that's another reason why you might want to come to me earlier, because some audio ideas that are time-consuming might be able to happen, whereas if you come to me at the end, they won't. So when you're talking to game audio pros, you want to give as much information as possible. Any design docs related to sound, images, videos, or references. This is kind of like a classic thing, sort of thing that I get, this quote. But it works, you know. So I'm making this futuristic space cowboy thing. It's like a cross between like maybe Good, Bad, and the Ugly and like Starship Troopers. We'll need that like cowboy feel, but with like electronic stuff or something. Like that's a good like start of a conversation. Like it doesn't like there is no Good, Bad, and the Ugly in Starship Troopers yet. But then we can those are references, and references are awesome because with a reference, then we can go to YouTube and show each other videos back and forth until we get close to like the idea that might work. So if you're making a game and you're dealing with audio people, think about what your game is like, what's similar, what you like, and have something to show when you give an audio person that. Because if you just don't have a reference and you're like, I want it to sound kind of spacey, but I don't know, like Western, but you don't have any like references, that's like way vague. And we need something kind of specific so that we're not giving you like 15 like revisions and hating you and hating ourselves and hating our work. So try to be specific. So be clear with what you want. If you don't know how to explain what you want, like ask for help. Maybe we have some ideas. So if you like literally don't know what your game needs, show us the game and then we'll give you some ideas. Yeah, so revisions might be necessary, but keep it to a reasonable amount. Usually that's 1 or 2. Not like 5 or 10. So, yes. And then you give your game an identity with its audio and make your game memorable for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. And with that, I'm going to play you out with a little more. Come on, come on.
Chasing pimples makes me hot and thirsty. Let me get a drink.
No time to stay here. Thank you.
Oh yeah, hey, boy!
Oh yeah, here comes Kool-Aid. Here comes Kool-Aid. We're gonna save the day. Here comes Kool-Aid. Here comes Kool-Aid. I'm gonna chase your thirst away.
Wait.
Your friend's Kool. Kool-Aid brand soft drink mix.
Oh yeah.
So now we can take your questions, comments. We've seen a lot. Yeah.
I think you missed a really good opportunity with that Peter Dinklage clip from Destiny. If you had left his name off the screen and asked everyone in this room, can you name the actor from that clip? I don't think anybody would have guessed Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones. I think he's in the same boat as the guys from Elder Scrolls, that they spent all that money on Peter Dinklage, and it did not sound like Peter Dinklage.
I agree with what you say, except for there's been so many articles about it already that I've seen. I don't know how many of you guys have seen, but it's been universally panned across the internet, so I thought that was kind of a gimme.
This is the first I've even heard that he was involved in the game.
I
Well,
guess the thing for me is, like, when I hear him in Destiny, it sounds like Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones. So basically, I'm walking around with a disembodied Tyrion Lannister, speaking sort of old-timey and in a dead monotone way, like everything is depressing. Oh, the door's locked. I can get that for you.
I just killed my dad. Yeah?
You know, like the exact opposite of that Dinklage stuff is whoever did the voiceovers for Portal.
Right.
You know, for
Well, Valve.
Gladys and Portal. I mean,
Valve,
she made that game.
Yeah, Valve, they do everything right.
And that's a pinnacle example. I mean, really good dialogue paired with really sharp writing can literally make or break a game. I mean, it won't necessarily destroy it, but it will make. It's the difference between something that's memorable for a good reason, or something that's memorable for an awful reason, or something that just you forget.
Well, and that kind of brings it back to like script writing, which I often do for the games I do voiceovers for, and that works because I know the actors I'm going to work with, I know what they sound like, I know what the words will sound like coming out of their mouth, and if you give me a script that I know isn't good, and you're like, no, don't change it, this is what I want, and I'm like, okay, this is only going to be so good, you know, and that's because you don't know what you're doing, and I know what's going to happen, but you know, like that's just the way it is. Like you have to like scripts are for actors, and if you think that your game script is the game script and you don't think about the actors as part of the formula, it's again that disembodied thing where it's not going to work. Other questions? Yeah.
Sound design question, I guess for Mike specifically. How many of your sounds do you find yourself originally recording versus going in and digging through a library and then remodifying a little bit? If you can, rough percentage maybe.
Rough percentage, probably like 30.
30% original sound, or recording,
Yeah.
and then the other side. Just because of
working
time?
on like larger scale projects or multiple projects, like, you know, you don't have the luxury of the time to go run out and like play in the woods for 2 hours.
Naturally.
So, you know, somebody somewhere might have already done that for you, and then you can just, you know, get that, maybe sweeten it with some of your own stuff, or just make tons of tweaks out of it, because it's usually not, I mean, you know, not everybody wants to hear me like hear a waterfall or anything, but I might be creative with that waterfall, like turn it into white noise for static on TV, so it just doesn't sound like static on TV. Like, you can do all sorts of crazy weird things.
I've been working with Mike for a while on Roller Coaster Tycoon World, and I don't think there's a single sound that we've grabbed out of a sound library that we didn't do a lot of stuff to before it got put in the game. So yeah, sound libraries, yes, but that's not. Yeah, you have to do a lot of work to get things to sound right in the game. Yeah.
When it comes to music, when you build a song, how long does that usually take to build a song, roughly?
Depends on the song, for one thing. Like
a level song, maybe.
Well, so there's two things. One is the length of the song, right? So it takes a certain amount of time to make a song, and like what the instruments are. So if you're composing like trumpets and trombones and flutes and, you know, snare drum and a bass drum, and like, so every instrument adds a layer of complexity, right? So like electronic songs are actually kind of relatively easy compared to that. That's why there's so many electronic game composers. That's part of it. The other thing is if you're going to record live instruments along with that, that's a whole other level of, you know, professionalism with, you know, the performance and the composing.
For me,
Yeah.
maybe depending on complexity, I usually tell people about a day. So maybe 8 hours, but it could be as few as like an hour. Like, I usually deal in like 60 seconds, so I usually deal in the realm of a minute to a minute 30. And basically getting that banged out, probably about 3 hours on average, and then, you know, if there's just banging my head against the wall on something, it can take me like a day or two, but I mean, it's a really moving target, like it's big, it's small.
So, anonymously, what was the most unreasonable thing you had a client ask you to
Paint my house.
Oh man. So I told you at the beginning of this that I started doing this in Russia, right? So, oh my God. I'll tell you what it is. I was asked to do an extremely sexist project, and I didn't want to, and that's kind of the thing. You have no control over what's being sent your way, as terms of like developers saying do this, and it's like, well, no, I'm not. Like, I have certain standards of what I'm willing to do and I'm not going to do. So for me, like that kind of was an extremely awkward thing to deal with, being asked to do something that I felt would be like, number one, I don't want to show this to my voice actresses because I have to work with them, and I'm like, I like them, and I care about them as people, and I don't want to put something in front of them that's offensive. So that's kind of where it starts with me. As far as orders go, I've had developers that are really unspecific about what they want, wanting like tons of revisions because they never get to saying what it is that they want, and I give them just amazing stuff, but it's not what they want. And then, then you're kind of like, okay, I've done like 5 versions of this for you, and they're all great. What's the problem here? And you have to work that out.
That's pretty much.
Yeah.
In the list of games you guys had on the screen that you worked on, I noticed 2 of them were Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. Was that something where you guys did audio with the host of those shows, or just recycle stuff from the actual show?
So that's a good question. I mean, in the realm of like licensed stuff, more often than not, in certain licenses, especially like Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, like they have things that have to be there. And sure, like they sent me their sounds for the show, and they went and recorded Pat Sajak, Vanna White, and Alex Trebek, thank you. Alex Trebek, and then whoever else is on Jeopardy now. There's like a lot of people. Anyway, what was really cool about those games was actually this was the first time that they got Pat Sajak and Vanna White to voice a game all the way through. And the first time they got Alex Trebek to ask all the questions all the way through. Basically, that was the first time that the game would literally feel like you were on the show. So you'd play the game, and the way I had it engineered and set up, if your name was player 1, 2, or 3, then you felt like you were amazing, like yay, because we couldn't do like custom names. Anyway, it felt incredibly organic and awesome in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I didn't have to do much sound design on my own. I added some menu stuff. That's about it.
That's kind of thing with licensed work is when you're dealing with a publisher that's using licensed material, they're going to give you all of the actors that you need and make that happen for you. And then your job is just to make it sound good in the game. So that's kind of a different thing. Mike's done a lot more licensed stuff than I have, so I've had the privilege of having way more freedom to make things sound the way I want, which has been awesome, but obviously like licensed material is kind of fun because everybody knows what you're doing. So that's kind of the trade-off.
I did have a lot of fun recreating those sounds before they gave it to me. So I actually made like completely accurate recreations of all of those sounds.
Yeah. You need to start by finding people making games, become friends with them, and make the game with them from the beginning. The game industry is full of people like us, and the only way to get in is to get experience. You want to make a demo reel that shows your sounds in a game working, and the more games you have, the better. And that will give you a jump start to show people, like, this is what I can do. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys have any recommendations for people trying to get into voice acting? Like any tools that I can find work with or something?
So like amateur voice actor, no experience with equipment or anything like that?
Yeah, even like something just like practice. Any recommendations for getting good practice?
So yeah, there's a few things. So first off, if you're going to be doing it on your own, you need to actually know how to use the software. And you need good software. I know some professional voice actors use Audacity, which is free. I personally hate it. I think if you're going to make it your career or at least some side passion that you're going to try to make money off of, you need to get the right equipment for the job, which means you're going to need to get something like Cubase, Pro Tools, Logic, something good that has good built-in plugins for compression and mastering, because you're going to have to master your own audio to some degree. And then, yeah, just practice, A lot of aspiring voice actors that they're trying to get into games and stuff like that will take videos of anime cartoons or something, and they'll redub it themselves and put it online and get critiqued and do stuff like that. And there's also sort of online groups where people are trying to do that, work with each other. And then you can also, you can get a voice acting coach to help you. There's a bunch of those. I can do that, so.
Yeah. You guys heard, do you know anything about Voice Bunny or other specifically voice acting?
So there's a couple big. Those are in my view kind of in the realm of borderline cheap. The problem is market saturation. So like Voices.com has what 10,000 people on it or something ridiculous. And as a voice director, I have like this amount of time to do everything. So I'm not going to like go through 5,000 voice demos to find a couple voices that I like. And I definitely don't want to like put out ads for voice and get like, 180 like responses and then have to find one out of that. And then go through Voice.com's like proprietary system and have to pay them like 15% off the top. That's kind of ridiculous. So those sites, like they work for some people, but the reality is that there's so many people that you're competing against on those sites. You need to like really network beyond that. Like if you're gonna be a voice actor, yeah, sure, sign up for those sites. Why not? Because you want to get yourself out to everything, but that's not really the way to start. You need to start by finding content, like people making content, and become friends with them.
I think it matters a lot if for example, if I believed in the project that they're working on, with my full heart.
Well, that through Voices.com, that's hard to show, for instance. But I mean, yeah, you have to like one thing that I as a voice producer, I have people coming up to me all the time, and I have like this amount of roles and this amount of people. So there's just kind of a limit there. So definitely make an amazing voice demo reel that shows what you're good at. Not everything you think you can do, what you're good at. That's kind of a problem where people are kind of shotgunning out like, I can do everything. And it's like, well, 2 of those things are really good. Why didn't you do that for your demo reel?
I like that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anything else? Yeah?
I was just curious from a music perspective, how much of your finished project would you say is actually notated or just invented on programs like Logic?
Okay. So, like, how much do I actually compose on paper versus just play out while I'm going at it?
Yeah, like either on paper or just any kind of notation program, like
Sibelius or something?
Well, yeah.
0% on Sibelius. I just don't have time to like write notes, and it doesn't. I learned to play piano taking Suzuki method, which is you learn to play by ear, and I learned when I was 5 years old. So it's not necessarily like music theory is sort of funny enough, like a weak suit for me. In which case, I'll just, a lot of people who are in music just sort of like attack it. So I just, I'm like, splattering with a paintbrush, and then hoping that Picasso thing comes out. Usually it does. So.
I will say in general that the only time that you ever need to notate music is if you're going to have it performed by other musicians. And the only time I've ever seen that was when we were working on War Thunder, where they scored the game and then recorded it with an orchestra. Otherwise, there's no point.
And it's really specific too. Okay. Really specific for notation, because if you're writing for someone else, it has to be written in a legible way. Just like if you write a script for somebody, you're not going to just have a full-on block of text with no commas, spaces, or periods that's just like, yeah, that's the script, read that. And, it's very easy when you're just playing stuff in, you're like, cool, I plinked out this melody, now let me bring it up in Sibelius, and I save the MIDI out, and it's like, you hand somebody a wall of notes, and they're like, what key is this in? It's in music, key of music, play it, right? Like, yeah, you have to have a specific set of skills, and that's just too lazy for all that. So.
Okay, I guess we're done. Clifton's next, and he's awesome. He's from Portland. Stick around for him. Come on up.